background about myself. I am an industry veteran of 20 years. I actually started off working in back of the house, worked my way up all the way from a busboy all the way through sous chef, general manager, beverage ops manager at a casino as well. So I have significant experience. That being said, I finally decided to take my experience and move it on to opening my own brand. Now, I grew up in New Paltz, New York, in Ulster County. It is technically considered a secondary market, and we decided to bring Fuchsia, our bar, to New Paltz. So we started Fuchsia in 2019. It was in response to the poor craft cocktail scene that we had. Ultimately, we became the first tropical bar in the Hudson Valley north of New York City. And that is really saying something. Within several months, I think by October, we actually launched, we got to participate with Food Network, New York City Cocktail Expo, as well as Tales of the Cocktail. Our main draw, though, is our extensive focus on spirits education and small brand support. Our venue itself is only 800 square feet. However, we carry over 160 kinds of rum, and almost exclusively rum, with no room for vodka, not a lot of gin, not a lot of whiskey. So let's delve into primary, secondary, and tertiary markets. The common conception is that primary markets are pretty much where it's at. It's the most dense. You think you have the best opportunity, but that's actually not really logical, because you're competing against 10 other people that have the same exact idea you do. They might just have a little bit more money. Secondary markets and tertiary markets are actually way more appealing simply because you have fewer barriers to entry, you have fewer competitors, you have multiple avenues to distinguish your concept, and more importantly, brand recognition is both organic and automated. So you can have Facebook ads, but you can also have more word of mouth, and it's a lot easier to get out there. Tertiary markets are probably not always the best ones for entry level, only because there's practically no competition, but then you really have to rely on organic word of mouth, and you have to really do a lot to build the trust of your clientele. So let's define the concept itself. You need value innovation, which is understanding that the industry's conditions can be changed for the better. You don't have to be stuck with a rigid market. You can also focus on strategic focus. Specifically, your competitors are not a benchmark of your success. So never peg yourself against other competitors and say, oh, these guys are doing better than me. They're irrelevant. And more importantly, use SMART goals. You need specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and of course, time-bound. And then think of your total solution with product and service offerings. What are your guests coming in for? What are they doing after they leave? How can you track it? How can you make their experience more enjoyable? Now, how many here, by show of hands, have heard of the red ocean versus blue ocean strategy? All right, we got a couple of people, that's good. So for those of you who are not familiar, red ocean versus blue ocean basically is primary versus secondary and tertiary markets. In the primary markets, you basically have to compete in existing market space, you have to beat the competition, you have to exploit the existing demand, and you have to make a value-cost trade-off. So ultimately, you're spending a lot of either money on operations or advertising. And then you have to align your entire system and spend a lot of money just to compete with 10 other companies. Say, example, you make whiskey. You're now competing against 20 other whiskeys in the primary market. How does that make any sense? Now, in a blue ocean, you have an uncontested market space. People are not aware of these bigger products, or they don't have enough opportunity. So guess what? You can get in there, you can pick an avenue, you can dominate it. You can capture new demand, you can create new demand. You can ultimately make your competition irrelevant by being the best that you can be at what you do. So you don't really have to spend a ton of money to align your entire system's activities to get you profits. So part of the blue ocean and red ocean strategy is the ERC Grid, which is eliminate, reduce, raise, and create. So with that, you want to eliminate anything that doesn't make sense. How many times have you been to a hotel and you've seen bellboys? Not often. They're costly, they're antiquated, it makes no sense. McDonald's, they got rid of their playrooms. Why? It didn't make sense. Same thing. Reduce. What can you reduce that you're currently doing that's draining money? And then what can you raise? Well, you can raise your guests' expectations, and you can ultimately create an environment that aligns with your ethos. With Fuchsia, we actually eliminated the shotgun marketing strategy of trying to blow up everywhere, going with digital ads everywhere. We focused only on Instagram and Instagram alone, and that within itself was enough to drive sales and interest. We also reduced reliance on large brands. I mean, we are advocates for the small guys, the guys that don't have a lot of market share. We want to tell their stories. So that's why we don't necessarily go very heavily with Bacardi. We don't go very heavily with the big four guys. We work specifically with small brands. Then we use that to raise awareness. The brand awareness, tell their story, be the advocate, and ultimately give the guest experience and create a small brand haven. So, if you want to expand into a secondary or tertiary markets, you have to consider a couple of things. You have to look at your KPIs, your key performance indicators. Now, those specifically are your profit and losses, how many guests are coming in on a regular basis, anything that's measurable, anything that's attainable, anything that's relevant. Don't fall into vanity marketing tactics, though, like Google, because sometimes those numbers don't really make sense. As mentioned before, be smart. Use the measurable, attainable, relevant, and time-oriented tasks. And then consider amenities in a small market. Is there an airport? Is there transportation? Is your brand going to be well recognized? And then partner with somebody on the ground. If you're going into a small market and you don't have the support system in place, find somebody who is already connected with everybody there and try to get involved. And last but not least, promote goodwill. I mean, that kind of goes without saying in this industry. We work in hospitality, we promote each other, we try to tell each other's stories. This is the best way to do it. You can't measure it, but you can certainly make people remember how you made them feel. Thank you, guys.